Good morning. Today we are going to talk about anatomy of medulla oblongata. In this session we will talk about definition of medulla oblongata, its location, about its shape and dimensions. We will also describe external and internal features of medulla oblongata. We are also going to describe briefly its functions and applied anatomy. The nervous system and endocrine system control and coordinate the body functions. Nervous system is divided into central and peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord, whereas peripheral nervous system consists of cranial and supinal nerve and their associated ganglia. Divisions of central nervous system. Central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord. Brain is embryologically divided into forebrain, which consists of two cerebral hemispheres, and diencephalon, which includes thalamus and hypothalamus. Midbrain and hindbrain, which consists of medulla oblongata and cerebellum. You can remember it by abbreviation PMC. In this slide, you can see forebrain consists of cerebrum and diencephalon. Cerebrum consists of two cerebral hemispheres, and diencephalon, which is hidden from the view, contains thalamus and hypothalamus. Midbrain, which connects forebrain with the hindbrain, which includes pons, medulla oblongata, and cerebellum. In this flowchart, you can again see division of brain into forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. In the forebrain is included two cerebral hemispheres plus lateral ventricle. It also includes deep portions of thalamus and hypothalamus with their cavity, that is third ventricle. Midbrain connects forebrain with the hindbrain. It is associated with vision, hearing, motor control, sleep, wake, arousal, that is alertness, and temperature regulation. Hindbrain consists of pons, medulla oblongata, and cerebellum. Its cavity is called fourth ventricle. Now coming to the medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata is a long stem-like structure which lies posterior and partially inferior to cerebellum. It is cone-shaped, responsible for autonomic functions ranging from vomiting to sneezing. The medulla contains cardiac, respiratory, vomiting, vasomotor centers, and therefore controls the autonomic functions like breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure, as well as sleep-wake cycle. So we can say medulla oblongata is part of the brainstem between pons and spinal cord. Brainstem includes midbrain, pons, and medulla. Superior to the medulla oblongata lies pons, and this junction is called pontomedullary junction, and inferiorly it continues as supinal cord. Let us go to the anatomical relations of medulla oblongata. If we take a sagittal section of brain, we see anterior to the medulla oblongata is basilar part of occipital bone, and we call it as clavius. Superiorly there is pons. It continues as spinal cord, and posteriorly there is cerebellum. So we can say anteriorly lies clavius and posteriorly lies cerebellum. Cerebellum and medulla are separated by fourth ventricle. There are two parts of medulla oblongata on posterior surface. Closed part of medulla oblongata is lower part of the medulla oblongata, where it encloses the central canal, as shown by this red dotted line. On the posterior surface, upper part of the medulla oblongata forms floor of fourth ventricle. This part of medulla is open because it does not enclose the central canal. So, medulla oblongata connects superiorly located pons with the spinal cord, which is located inferiorly. Present in the medulla oblongata are ascending and descending tracts. Ascending tracts carry sensory information, whereas descending tracts carry motor information. Let us go to this animation to see how these tracts are formed. In this flow chart, there is dorsal root ganglion, which represents the first order neuron. From dorsal root ganglion, sensations go to the gracile and cuneate nuclei, which are located in medulla oblongata on the same side. From there, these first order neurons decussate there with the second order neurons. The postsynaptic fibers pass anteriorly as internal arcuate fibers, or together they constitute medial lemniscus. These fibers cross to the opposite side at the level of sensory decussation, then reach the thalamus, which contains third order neurons. From thalamus, these fibers originating from third order neurons go to the sensory cortex, as shown in this animation. So from dorsal root ganglion, fibers go to the nucleus gracilis and cuneatus located in the medulla oblongata. From there, they cross as medial lemniscus to the opposite side and reach the thalamus. And from thalamus, they go to the sensory cortex. Now, what is this posterior column? Posterior column contains two tracts, fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. It carries impulses concerned with the proprioception and discriminative touch from ipsilateral side of the body. It contains axons of primary afferent neurons that have entered cord through dorsal root of supinal nerves. Fasciculus gracilis contains fibers received at sacral, lumbar, and lower thoracic segment, while as fasciculus cuneatus, which is medially located, contains fibers received at upper thoracic and cervical levels. Another type of fibers which are present in the medulla are motor fibers in the form of corticosupinal and corticobulbar tract. These fibers originate from cerebral cortex in the form of corticospinal tract, pass through the internal capsule, pons, and midbrain. After reaching the caudal part of medulla oblongata, 85% of these fibers cross to the opposite side and form lateral corticospinal tract. Only 15% of the fibers they remain uncrossed and go to the anterior horn cells at different segmental levels. This decussation, which occurs at the level of pyramids, is called motor decussation, also called the pyramidal decussation. So let us compare these ascending and descending tract. So for ascending tracts, we have dorsal root ganglion which acts as the first order neuron, nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus, which are present in the medulla as second order neuron. From there, fibers originating from nucleus gracilis and cuneatus or in the form of internal arcuate fibers. These fibers cross to the opposite side, and at this level we call it as sensory decussation. So sensory decussation is also present in medulla. Now these fibers go to the thalamus, which represents the third order neurons. From thalamus, these fibers go to the sensory cortex. In contrast, upper motor neurons located in the cerebral cortex and brainstem give origin to the motor fibers. These fibers, after passing through the brainstem and spinal cord, they relay either in anterior horn cells. Descending tract does not contain first, second, and third order neurons. Here we have upper motor neurons and lower motor neurons. Upper motor neurons are found in the cerebral cortex, brainstem. They carry information down to activate interneurons and lower motor neurons. In contrast, lower motor neurons are found in anterior horn cells of the spinal cord and in motor cranial nerve nuclei in brainstem. The superior margin of the medulla oblongata is located at the junction between medulla and pons, while the inferior margin is marked by origin of first pair of cervical supinal nerves. This occurs just as the medulla oblongata exits the skull through foramen magnum. Coming to the external features of the medulla oblongata, it is conical in shape, decreasing in width as it extends inferiorly. It is approximately 3 centimeters long and 2 centimeters wide at its largest point. The structures visible on the ventral surface of the medulla are the pyramids, the olives, and 5 cranial nerves. On the anterior surface of medulla oblongata is anterior median fissure in the midline. This fissure is interrupted by decussation at the level of pyramids. As we move away from the midline, two sulci are visible, the ventrolateral sulcus and posterolateral sulcus. Pyramids are paired swellings found between the anterior median fissure and the ventrolateral sulcus. They are produced by underlying corticospinal and corticobulbar tract fibers. Let us go to this picture to make things more clear. So on the ventral surface of the medulla is anterior median fissure or sulcus. Lateral to it, anterolateral sulcus shown by the red dotted line, and posterior to that is posterolateral sulcus shown by the yellow dotted line. On either side of the anterior median fissure, there is upper end and pontomedullary junction or paired swellings found between anterior median fissure and the ventrolateral sulcus. These paired swellings are called pyramids. They are produced by underlying corticospinal and corticobulbar tracts. Olivus or pair of swellings located lateral to the pyramids between the ventrolateral and posterolateral sulci produced by underlying olivary nucleus. Now, what are the various cranial nerves arising from the medulla oblongata? As already said, it is related to the five cranial nerves, but only last four cranial nerves arise from medulla oblongata. So, arising from pontomedullary junction is six cranial nerve. From the posterior lateral sulcus arises 9th, 10th, and 11th cranial nerves in series, and from anterolateral sulcus arises 12th cranial nerve. So four cranial nerves arise from medulla oblongata. Then sixth cranial nerve, which lies at the pontomedullary junction, arises from pons, not from medulla oblongata. If we go to the posterior surface of the medulla oblongata, this surface is not visualized unless we remove the cerebellum, as shown in this diagram. Now, if we take out the cerebellum, posterior surface of medulla oblongata becomes visible. It is divided into two parts. Closed part and open part is the lower part where there is central canal, and open part there is no central canal. Similar to the anterior surface, posterior surface has a midline structure, the posterior median sulcus, which is continuous below as the posterior median sulcus of spinal cord. Above the sulcus ends at the point in which the fourth ventricle develops. As we move lateral from the midline, the fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus are seen separated by posterior intermediate sulcus. So in the midline there is posterior median sulcus. On either side of it there is fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus in the lower part of the medulla oblongata. In the upper part of the medulla oblongata on the posterior surface, we see there is floor of fourth ventricle. Dorsally, the lower part of the floor of the fourth ventricle forms the upper part of the posterior surface of medulla oblongata. At the lower corner of the diamond-shaped floor, the hypoglossal and vagal triangle can be seen. Hypoglossal triangle is adjacent to midline with vagal triangle lateral to it. Now let us go to the internal structure of medulla oblongata. What do you expect will be if we take a section of the medulla oblongata, it would look like, or in other words, what is inside, what you will find in each section through the medulla oblongata. So ascending and descending tracts are there, as already said. We are a cranial nerve nuclei and their connections, reticular formation, other nuclei like olivary nucleus in medulla, trapezoid body in pons and red nucleus in midbrain. So cranial nerve nuclei. Let us go to the general features of cranial nerve nuclei. A cranial nerve nucleus is a group of cells which participate in formation of a cranial nerve. It is equivalent to the dorsal root ganglion of supinal nerve in sensory cranial nerve and to anterior horn cells of supinal nerves in motor cranial nerve. Each nuclei performs single function. It may be either sensory or motor. A cranial nerve which has one function is connected to one nuclei that serves that function. Cranial nerves which have many functions are connected to number of cranial nerve nuclei. A cranial nerve which has many functions is connected to number of nuclei equal to the number of its functions, and each nuclei also serves only one function. There are shared nuclei Two or more cranial nerves can share one nucleus. The nuclei which are present in the medulla are hypoglossal nucleus, dorsal nucleus of vagus, nucleus ambiguous, supinal accessory nucleus, and also superior and inferior salivatory nuclei. We also find supinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve, nucleus of solitary tract in medulla oblongata. If we take a section of medulla oblongata, what do we see inside? Let us go to this. What do you see here? You see an egg which contains yolk surrounded by white of an egg. Now if we take a section here, what do you see? We see both. In the center is yolk like the nucleus of a cell and it is surrounded by white of an egg. Now if we take section at different levels, what do you see there? We see only egg white, no yolk. In the same way, if we take sections at different levels of medulla oblongata, structure will vary. Let's divisions of medulla into two regions. Medulla is divided into two regions, open and closed medulla. The distinction is made based on whether CSF containing cavities are surrounded by medulla, closed medulla or not, that we call it as open medulla. The medulla becomes open when the central canal opens into the fourth ventricle. Some features are seen in all sections of the medulla oblongata. Anteriorly we can see the paired lumps representing pyramids which are separated by the anterior median fissure. Centrally, the central canal can be seen as it rises from the fourth ventricle in the final cross section. In other words, if we take the section at the lower level of medulla, which anteriorly pyramids are seen there, we can also see the central canal. But if we take a section at the higher levels where the medulla is open, we cannot see the central canal. To see the internal features of the medulla oblongata, we can take sections at different levels. Sections can be taken at the level of pyramids, at the level of medial lemnisci, or at the level of olives. In this session, we are going to discuss section at the level of pyramids and section at the level of medial lemnisci. Let us first go to the section at the level of pyramidal decussation. So as already said, pyramidal fibers, this is the major decussation point of the descending motor fibers. Roughly 75% of the motor fibers present within the pyramids cross diagonally and posteriorly and continue down the supinal column as the lateral corticosupinal tract. About 15% of fibers they don't cross, they continue as the anterior corticosupinal tract. These tracts originate in the cerebral cortex, carrying motor fibers to the spinal cord and brain. They are responsible for voluntary control of musculature of the body and face. There are no synapses within the descending pathway. At the termination of descending tract, the neurons synapse with the lower motor neurons. Thus, all the neurons within the descending motor system are classed as upper motor neurons. Their cell bodies are found in the cerebral cortex or in the brain stem, with their axons remaining within central nervous system. The pyramidal tract derive their name from medullary pyramids of the medulla oblongata, which they pass through. These pathways are responsible for voluntary control of musculature of body and face. Functionally, these tracts are divided into two. Corticospinal tracts supplies the musculature of the body, and corticobulbar tracts supply musculature of head and neck. Corticospinal tracts begin in the cerebral cortex from primary motor cortex, premotor cortex, and supplementary motor area. They also receive nerve fibers from the somatosensory area, which plays a role in regulating the activity of the ascending tracts. After originating from the cortex, the neurons converge and descend through the internal capsule located between the thalamus and the basal ganglia. This is clinically important as the internal capsule is particularly susceptible to compression from hemorrhagic bleeds known as the capsular stroke. Such an event could cause lesion of descending tracts. After internal capsule, the neurons pass through crest cerebri of the midbrain, pons, and medulla. In the inferior part of the medulla, the tract divides into fibers within the lateral corticospinal tract discussed earlier and anterior corticosupinal tract. The anterior corticosupinal tract remains ipsilateral, descending into the spinal cord. They then decussate and terminate in the ventral horn of the cervical and upper thoracic levels. Now, if we take a section at this level, what we see, so corticospinal tract crossing at the level of pyramids, number one. Second, in the central, there is central canal. Posteriorly, there is white matter of the medulla. There are two fasciculi, fasciculi gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. Underlying fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus is nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus. Now let us go to the sensory decussation or decussation at the level of medial lemniscus. This is also called the sensory decussation. You should not get confused at this stage. The dorsal column and medial lemniscus pathway, also known as the posterior column medial lemniscus pathway, is a sensory pathway of the central nervous system that conveys sensations of touch, vibration, two-point discrimination, and proprioception, that is position from skin and joints. Now, if we take a section of medulla oblongata at the level of sensory decussation, what do you see there? So we have given a horizontal cut and taken a horizontal section at the level of sensory decussation. So at this level, we see again anteriorly there are pyramids. Now those ascending tracts which started their origin from dorsal root ganglion, then reached nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus of medulla, which contain second order neurons. From there, fibers originate. The fibers originating from second order neurons are called internal arcade fibers. Now these fibers form the medial lemniscus and they cross at the level of sensory decussation. As shown in this diagram, second order neurons are present in nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus. The fibers originating from these neurons are called internal arcade fibers. Now these fibers cross at the level of sensory decussation and ascend as medial lemniscus on the opposite side. The third order neurons, which are located in the thalamus, give origin to fibers which finally go to the postcentral gyrus of somatosensory cortex. Let us go to this flow chart. So there is dorsal root ganglion, which represents as the first order neuron, nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus, which represents the second order neuron. Nerve fibers originating from there are called the internal arcade fibers. These internal arcade fibers together constitute the medial lemniscus. Decussation occurs at the level of sensory decussation, results in crossing over of these fibers contained in medial lemniscus. Now these fibers ascend to relay in thalamus, which represents the third order neuron. From there, sensory fibers go to the sensory cortex, which is located in the postcentral gyrus. So medial lemniscus transmits information from the body to the primary somatosensory cortex in the postcentral gyrus of the parietal lobe of brain. The pathway receives information from sensory receptors throughout the body, carries this in nerve tracts in the white matter of the dorsal column of the spinal cord to the medulla, where it is continued in the medial lemniscus onto thalamus and relayed there through internal capsule and transmitted to the somatosensory cortex. What is the difference between medial lemniscus and dorsal column? The name dorsal column and medial lemniscus comes from the two structures that carry sensory information. In spinal cord, we call it as dorsal column. On either side of the posterior median sulcus, you will find their dorsal column. But in spinal cord, it is called dorsal column, and in the medulla oblongata, it is called medial lemniscus. Let us go to this flow chart to understand the origin and termination of the pyramidal tract. These fibers originate in the cerebral cortex from primary motor cortex, premotor cortex, and supplementary motor area. After passing through the internal capsule, the neurons pass through crest cerebri, the midbrain, the pons, into medulla oblongata. What happens at the level of medulla oblongata? At the level of pyramids, 15% of fibers, they do not cross, they then decussate and terminate in ventral horn of cervical and upper thoracic segmental levels. About 85% of the fiber they cross to the opposite side, they form the lateral corticosupinal tract and then descend into the supinal cord terminating in ventral horn at all segmental levels. From the ventral horn, the lower motor neurons go on to supply the muscles of the body. As shown in this diagram, so these corticospinal fibers, they originate in the cerebral cortex, pass through the thalamus internal capsule. After reaching the medulla oblongata, they continue as anterior corticosupinal fibers, about 15%. We do not cross. Others cross to the opposite side, and this we called as the lateral corticosupinal tract. They represent about 85% of the fibers. Uncrossed fibers represent about 15% of the fibers. They are called the anterior corticosupinal tract. So if we compare the two tracts, in the ascending tracts we have dorsal root ganglion, which represents the first order neurons. Nucleus gracilis and cuneatus represent as the second order neurons. Then there is sensory decussation where the internal arcade fibers cross to the opposite side at the level of sensory decussation. They go to the thalamus, which represents the third order neurons, and from thalamus, fibers originating from third order neurons, they go to the cerebral cortex. In contrast, descending motor pathways originate from upper motor neurons located in the cerebral cortex or brainstem. From there, these tracts then go to the anterior horn cells of the supinal cord, and fibers originating from there, they go to musculature of the body. We don't have first, second, and third order neurons in motor pathway. Upper motor neurons are found in cerebral cortex and brainstem and carry information down to activate interneurons and lower motor neurons. Lower motor neurons are found in anterior horn of spinal cord and in motor cranial nucleus in brainstem. Vasculature of medulla oblongata is very important because it is commonly involved in strokes. The vasculature of medulla oblongata is very important but complex. It is supplied by anterior spinal artery, posterior spinal artery, posterior inferior cerebral artery, anterior inferior cerebral artery, and vertebral arteries. As shown in this diagram, blood supply comes from posterior inferior cerebellar artery, which is called the pica, anterior inferior cerebral artery, and basilar artery. Basilar artery is formed by joining of the two vertebral arteries. It is also supplied by the anterior supinal artery and posterior supinal artery. Role of anterior supinal artery. It supplies medulla oblongata throughout. The anterior supinal artery supplies a region beginning at the central canal or anterior border of the fourth ventricle and to encompass the pyramids. Below the level of olivus, the posterior half of the medulla is supplied by the posterior supinal artery. To make the understanding of blood supply very simple, let us go to this animation. This cylinder represents the medulla oblongata. In the center of it is central canal of medulla oblongata. So whole of the medulla oblongata anterior to the central canal is supplied by the anterior supinal artery. Throughout the medulla, the anterior supinal artery supplies a region beginning at the central canal or anterior border of the fourth ventricle and fans out to encompass pyramids, as shown in this animation. The area of medulla oblongata posterior to the central canal is divided into two. Below the level of olivus, the posterior half of the medulla is supplied by the posterior supinal artery. And above the level of olivus, the remaining portions are supplied by the posterior inferior cerebellar arteries. So anterior supinal artery supplies whole length of the medulla and anterior to the central canal. Below the level of olivus, the region of the medulla oblongata posterior to the central canal is supplied by posterior supinal artery. Above the level of olivus, the region of the medulla posterior to the central canal is supplied by pica, that is posterior inferior cerebral artery, and vertebral arteries. The veins drain dorsally to the occipital sinus and ventrally into the basilar plexus of venus and the inferior petrosal sinus. The medullary veins communicate with supinal veins. Now, what is medial medullary syndrome? This syndrome is caused by involvement of anterior supinal artery. It is also called an anterior supinal syndrome, where the corticosupinal tract is involved in the region of medullary pyramids. So now we know the corticospinal tract contains motor fibers. As a result, this lesion results in contralateral spastic hemiparesis. It also supplies the medial lemniscus, so there is contralateral loss of tactile and vibration sensations from trunk and extremities. What is lateral medullary syndrome? Lateral medullary syndrome is also called the Pica syndrome or Wallenberg syndrome. The vessel which is involved in the lateral medullary syndrome is posterior inferior cerebellar artery. It is characterized by sensory defects affecting the face and cranial nerves on the same side with infarct, loss of pain and temperature on the ipsilateral side of the face, but sensory defects affecting the trunk and extremities on the opposite side of infarction. So there is loss of pain and temperature on the ipsilateral side of face, but sensory defects affecting the trunk and extremities on the opposite side of infarction. I want to summarize my lecture as medulla oblongata is part of hindbrain connecting pons with the spinal cord and performs autonomic functions. It is divided into open and closed parts. Its anterior surface presents pyramids or levers and gives attachment to last four cranial nerves. Posterior surface is hidden with its upper part forming floor of fourth ventricle, pyramidal tract and medial lemniscus decussate in the caudal part of the medulla. It is supplied by anterior, posterior spinal and posterior inferior cerebellar arteries. It is also supplied by the vertebral arteries. Anterior, supinal and posterior inferior cerebellar arteries are involved in medial and lateral medullary syndrome respectively. Now let us go for a quiz based on this lecture. You will be provided an MCQ with four choices. You have to find the most accurate one. Which of the following cranial nerves does not originate from medulla? 9, 6, 10, 12. 6 is the wrong option. Which of the following arteries is involved in medial medullary syndrome? Anterior supinal artery, posterior inferior cerebellar artery, superior cerebellar artery, anterior inferior cerebellar, anterior inferior cerebellar. So anterior supinal artery is involved in this syndrome. Involvement of supinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve causes ipsilateral loss of pain and temperature on the face, contralateral loss of pain and temperature on face, ipsilateral loss of pain and temperature in the lower half of the face, contralateral loss of pain and temperature in the lower half of face. So A is the correct option. It causes ipsilateral loss of pain and temperature on face. Which of the following arteries is involved in lateral medullary syndrome? Anterior supinal, posterior inferior cerebellar, superior cerebellar, anterior inferior cerebellar. So posterior inferior cerebellar artery is involved in lateral medullary syndrome. Which of the following structures is not included in brain stem? Pons, medulla, cerebellum, midbrain. Midbrain is not included in the brain stem, which is not a feature of Horner syndrome. Ptosis, meiosis, anhydrosis, madrosis. Madrosis is not a feature of Horner syndrome. It occurs in third nerve palsy. A lesion of corticospinal tract on the right side above the level of decussation causes ipsilateral hemiplegia, contralateral hemiplegia, quadriplegia, paraplegia. B is the correct option. Which of the following is not clinical manifestation of Pica syndrome? Loss of pain sensation on the same side of face, loss of pain and temperature sensation on the same side of body, loss of pain and temperature sensation on contralateral side of the body, loss of temperature sensation on the same side of the body. B is the wrong option. Thank you for watching this video. Do not forget to like, subscribe and share this channel. Press on the bell icon to remain updated. Thank you.